cop standing at my car window said, "Ma'am, you're listed as a missing person in a report that was filed 7 years ago." I just stared at him. That has to be wrong. I'm not a missing person. But he was already turning his laptop toward me so I could see. My name was right there, Natalie. My exact birth date. And a photo of me from years ago with bold red letters across the top. Active missing person case. Officer, this has to be some kind of system mistake. I've been living in the same apartment for 2 years. I have a job. I pay my bills. None of that works if I'm a missing person. He pointed at the screen. This report says you're 19 years old and disappeared at age 12 from a town about 5 hours from here. I shook my head. I'm 25. I turned 25 in March. There's no way I'm 19. He tapped the file. There's a birth certificate attached, and it says you were born 19 years ago. That's not right, I said quickly. My mom has my birth certificate at home. I've seen it myself. He asked if I had any copy on me. Anything besides my license that could prove my date of birth. I didn't. I'd never needed one. Mom always kept all the important documents locked in a box in her closet. Said it was safer that way. I never questioned it. My hands started shaking. I can prove I'm not some missing kid. I went to high school. I graduated class of 2019. You can check. The officer typed in the school's name, waited, then looked back at me, and something in his expression shifted. There's no record of you ever attending that school. No record of graduation either. That didn't make any sense. I remembered high school, friends, hallways, graduation day. But when I tried to recall details, teachers' names, classes, it all blurred, like trying to remember a dream days later. Schools lose records sometimes, I said, but my voice was shaking now. He kept scrolling. The report says you were last seen leaving a middle school at age 12, wearing a blue jacket and carrying a backpack. Something cold ran through me. There was a blue jacket sitting in my back seat right now. I'd had it for as long as I could remember. I always said I got it in high school, but I couldn't actually remember getting it. He pulled up another screen. The FBI created an age progression image 2 years ago to show what the missing girl might look like now. He turned it toward me, and my heart stopped. It wasn't just similar. It was my face. Same jawline, same eyebrows. Even the small scar on my chin. I pressed myself back into the seat. That could be anyone? I whispered, not even believing it myself. He kept reading. The report was filed by a woman named Allison. She's listed as your mother. I shook my head hard. My mom's name is Denise. She raised me my whole life. I don't know anyone named Allison. The officer continued. Allison has contacted police over 400 times in the last 7 years. She never stopped searching for you. He paused, then read the last note out loud. She won't know she's missing. Whoever took her will give her a new name and a new age, and she'll believe it. My entire body went cold. I thought about every document I'd ever needed. Mom handled all of it. Every form, every signature. I'd never held my own birth certificate. I'd never even seen baby photos of myself. I grabbed my phone and started scrolling through my camera roll. If I was really 25, there had to be something, childhood photos, birthdays, anything. But the oldest photo I had was from the week I moved into my apartment. Before that, nothing. No birthdays. No holidays. Nothing at all. I always told myself they got lost when Mom switched phones. The officer watched me quietly, then said, I need to make a call. He dialed a number and put it on speaker. After a few rings, a woman answered. This is Allison. Is there any news about my daughter? The moment I heard her voice, something cracked open in my mind. A memory hit me. Being little, maybe 4 or 5, lying in bed while a woman tucked the blanket under my chin and whispered goodnight. That voice, it was hers. Not the woman who raised me. The officer asked me to come to the station. I agreed, not because I believed him, but because I was sure there had to be a mistake. There had to be. At the station, the officer led me into a small room with a table, 2 chairs, and a laptop already open. He sat across from me and turned the screen so we could both see it. Then he started going through the case file, Not the quick summary I'd seen earlier, but everything. Slowly, piece by piece, like he wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. The missing person report had been filed 15 years ago in a town about 5 hours east of where we were. Attached to it was a photo, not the age-progressed one, but a real picture of a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old. Messy hair, big eyes, and a small scar on her chin. Without thinking, I reached up and touched my own chin. My fingers found the same raised line of skin I'd had my entire life. The officer noticed but didn't say anything. He just kept going. The report lists 7 different addresses across 7 states over 15 years, he said. Every time Allison got close, the trail went cold, and a new location appeared. 7 states. I tried to think back to all the places I'd lived growing up. A few came to mind immediately, but the more I thought about it, the more memories surfaced. Boxes. Always boxes. Mom packing late at night, sometimes in the middle of the night, telling me we were going on an adventure, saying the next place would be better. I always believed her. I thought we moved so much because of jobs or rent. I never questioned it. I asked the officer about records, school, jobs, anything that would prove we lived a normal life. He shook his head. There's no employment history under the name Denise until 3 years ago, and no school records for you at any of those locations. The room felt like it tilted. I grabbed the edge of the table. I was homeschooled, I said, for long stretches, sometimes a year or more. Mom said the schools weren't good enough, and that part was real. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table doing workbooks, flashcards, quizzes. She taught me everything, but none of it existed on paper. No transcripts, no records, nothing official. The officer pulled up one last thing. A grainy security camera image from a grocery store parking lot, dated 15 years ago. The picture was blurry, washed out, but you could still make out a woman walking quickly toward a car, holding the hand of a small girl in a blue jacket. The woman's face wasn't visible, but her posture, the way she walked, slightly leaning to one side, I knew that walk. I had followed that same walk through parking lots and stores my entire life. It was Mom. I couldn't speak. I just stared at the screen, the woman, the little girl being pulled along so fast her feet barely touched the ground. The officer didn't push me. He didn't ask if I recognized her. He just let the silence sit. After a while, he closed the laptop halfway and looked at me. The woman who filed this report has been waiting 15 years to meet you, he said quietly. She's already on her way. She lives 2 hours from here. My first instinct was to leave. Just walk out, get in my car and disappear. I didn't want to meet a stranger claiming to be my mother. I already had a mom. I had birthdays, memories, late-night talks on the couch. That was real. It had to be. But then I thought about the little girl in the blue jacket. She didn't get a choice, and I realized I didn't have the right to walk away without hearing the truth. So I stayed. I sat in that uncomfortable chair under harsh lights, waiting for a woman named Allison to arrive, while my entire life slowly unraveled. About 2 hours later, she arrived. I saw her before she saw me. There was a glass partition between the hallway and the room, and I watched as she walked in. The officer met her at the entrance. She was smaller than I expected. I don't know why that mattered, but it did. In my head, she had been tall and strong, someone who filled a room. But Allison looked fragile. Her shoulders were drawn in, and her hands were shaking so badly I could see it from where I sat. She clutched a manila folder tightly to her chest, like it was the only thing holding her together. I studied her face, waiting for something, some feeling, some connection. Nothing came. She was a stranger, and for a moment, I almost felt relief. If she were really my mother, wouldn't I feel something? Wouldn't there be some instinct, some recognition? But there was nothing. Then the officer brought her into the room. She sat across from me and placed the folder on the table, keeping one hand on top of it like she wasn't ready to let go. She looked at me, her eyes red and filled with something I couldn't name. "Hi, Natalie," she said softly. Just 2 words. But the way she said my name did something to me. It was careful, gentle, like she'd been holding on to it for years. My throat tightened. My eyes burned. I didn't understand why. I had no memory of her. But something deep inside me reacted anyway. Like a part of me recognized her, even if my mind didn't. Allison must have seen something change in my face because she took a slow breath and opened the folder. Inside were photos. Baby photos. The first was of a newborn. Tiny, red-faced, fists curled up near her cheeks. Then a toddler sitting on a blanket in the grass, squinting into the sun. And then, a little girl, maybe 3 years old, smiling with cake smeared all over her face. There was a small scar on her chin. The exact same one. Allison pointed to it, her hand trembling. "You fell off the porch steps when you were 2, she said. "You hit the edge of a flower pot. I drove to the hospital as fast as I could. They gave you 3 stitches, you screamed the whole time. Then you laughed when they gave you a popsicle." My hand moved to my chin again. All my life, Mom had told me I got that scar from a bike accident when I was 8. She described it so many times I could picture it clearly. But here it was in a photo of a 3-year-old. Years before that story was supposed to happen. Allison kept going, her voice steady at first, like she had practiced this. "You were 4, she said. "We were at a grocery store. I was loading bags into the trunk. You were right next to the cart. I turned my back for just a few seconds." Her voice broke. 15 seconds. That's all it took. "And you were gone." She told me about the first year, how she went back to that same parking lot every night, sitting in the same spot with the windows down, waiting, hoping she'd hear me call for her. She told me about the 400 calls to police, the private investigators she hired with money she didn't have, the credit cards she maxed out, the loans no one would give her anymore. Every year, she had someone create a new age-progressed image of me, just so she could recognize my face as I grew up without her. By the time she finished, tears were streaming down her face, but she kept talking, like she couldn't stop, like she had been holding all of this in for 15 years. Then suddenly, she reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. Not gently, tight enough that I could feel my pulse against her fingers. "I need you to understand," she said, her voice desperate, almost breaking. "I never stopped looking. Not for a day. Not for an hour. You were always my daughter. Always." I tried to pull away, but her grip tightened. "Please," she whispered. "Don't leave again." I yanked my arm free and stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly across the floor behind me. My wrist was red where she had held it. Allison froze. She looked at her own hand like she didn't recognize it, like she couldn't believe what she'd just done. The room went completely silent. Then her face collapsed. Not slowly, but all at once. She placed both hands flat on the table, pressing them down hard like she was forcing herself not to reach for me again. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I'm so sorry. I've been waiting so long. I just—" She stopped, took a shaky breath, and leaned back. Her voice softened. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. I mean that. I can sit over here, or I can leave if you want. Just tell me what you need." And somehow, that hit me harder than everything else. Not the photos, not the report, not the years she spent searching. That, because she caught herself. She realized what she did, and she stepped back. No excuses, no blame. She just apologized and asked what I needed. And I stood there, heart pounding, wrist still throbbing, and I thought about Mom. Mom who never backed down. Mom who never admitted she was wrong. Mom who never once looked at me and asked, "What do you need?" I didn't sit back down. Not yet. But I didn't leave either. I stepped outside. The night air hit my face, and it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in hours. I stood under a flickering streetlight, pulled out my phone, and opened my contacts. There it was. Mom Redheart. I stared at it for a second, then pressed call. I needed to hear it from her. Not from a file. Not from a stranger. From the woman who raised me. The phone rang. Once. Twice. Then she picked up. "Hey, sweetie. Everything okay? You don't usually call this late." And for a moment, everything felt normal. That voice. Warm. Familiar. Safe. The voice that read me bedtime stories. That called me to dinner. that stayed up with me when I was sick. For a few seconds, I was just a daughter calling her mom. I almost hung up. I almost said, "Never mind. Just wanted to say good night." I almost let it all go. But then I thought about the little girl in the blue jacket, and the photo of a 3-year-old with a scar that shouldn't exist yet. And I asked, "Mom, do you know anyone named Allison?" Silence. Not confusion. Not hesitation. Just nothing. I even pulled the phone away to check if the call dropped. It hadn't. The line was still connected. I put it back to my ear and waited. 5 seconds. 10. I could hear her breathing faintly, and when she finally spoke again, her voice was different, flat, controlled. "Where did you hear that name?" Not "Who's Allison?" Not "I don't know what you're talking about." She already knew. I told her everything: the traffic stop, the report, the case file, the photos. And the whole time, I waited for her to react. To get angry. To deny it. To fight. That's what she always did. But she didn't. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She didn't deny anything. She just said, "I gave you a good life, Natalie. I gave you everything. A home, food, love. Every day for 15 years. I gave you a life that woman never could." My legs gave out. 1 second I was standing. The next, I was sitting on the curb, phone pressed to my ear. "Mom," I whispered. "Did you take me?" A short pause. Then, "I did what I had to do." Her voice stayed calm, like she was explaining a decision, not confessing a crime. "I was meant to be a mother. They said I couldn't have children. They were wrong. I was better than anyone." Every word hit like ice. She wasn't breaking down. She wasn't sorry. She was justifying it. "I watched her," she continued. "I saw how she looked at her phone, how she didn't pay attention. I would never have done that." I could barely breathe. "You knew who I was this whole time," I said. "I knew," she replied. "And I made you better. I made you safe. Everything I did was for you." I pulled the phone away and stared at it. For minutes. That's all it took for the woman who raised me to admit she stole me, and believed she was right. I hung up. No goodbye. Nothing. Just silence. Then I stood up and walked back into the station. I walked back into the station. The officer was near the front desk talking to someone. But when he saw me, he stopped immediately. One look at my face and he knew something had changed. I walked straight up to him. "She admitted it," I said. "Everything. She's at the house right now." He didn't waste a second. He started making calls. Then he told me to go back into the room. Allison was still there. She had moved, now sitting a few chairs away from where I'd been earlier, pressed against the far wall. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, her eyes lowered. She didn't look up when I entered. She didn't speak. She didn't try to touch me. She just stayed. I sat down and pulled the folder closer, opening it again. I looked at the photos one more time. Not because I suddenly remembered anything. I didn't. The newborn, the toddler, the little girl with cake on her face. None of it triggered a single memory. But I didn't need memories anymore. That little girl had my scar. My smile. She was me. About 40 minutes later, the officer came back with an update. "They didn't have to chase her," he said. "When they knocked, she opened the door like she was expecting them." He told me she was calm. Not upset. Not scared. Just calm. "They searched the house and found the lockbox in her closet. Exactly where I said it would be. Inside was a birth certificate. Not the one I thought was mine. A real one. Different date. Different city. And under Mother, Allison. Denise had kept it the entire time. 15 years. Opening that closet every day. Knowing exactly what was inside." The officer kept talking, but my mind drifted. Every time she told me the lockbox was for safekeeping. Every time she said she'd get my documents later. Every time she changed the subject when I asked about my childhood. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was control. For 15 years, she knew exactly who I was. And she chose to keep going. Then the officer told me more. She had been told years ago she couldn't have children. She never accepted it. She went through therapists but refused to believe them. And suddenly everything made sense. The way she argued with everyone. The way she had to be right about everything. The way every conflict ended with her as the victim. He said she had been watching Allison before it happened. Studying her. Timing it. She even had a car seat already installed before she ever walked into that grocery store. I pictured it. The woman I called Mom sitting in a parked car watching a family. Planning everything. And for the first time I understood something clearly. I was never saved. I was chosen. Picked out like something she decided she deserved. Then the officer's radio crackled. There was movement, voices, car doors. "They're putting her in the car now," he said. The line stayed open. I could hear everything. She didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't ask for a lawyer. But just before they shut the car door, I heard her voice. Calm, steady. "You were mine." That was it. No apology. No regret. Just that. Then the door shut. Silence. I set the phone down slowly and looked at Allison. She was still sitting there, still giving me space. Still waiting. I didn't hug her. I didn't call her Mom. I just picked up the folder and held it in my lap. "Can I keep these for a while?" I asked. She nodded. That was all. I didn't call her for 9 days. When I finally did, we talked for 11 minutes. About nothing important. What I had for dinner. The weather. Normal things. She didn't ask about the case. She didn't ask me to call her Mom. When the conversation ended, she just said, "Same time next week?" And I said yes.